He didn't just leave her, he engineered her destruction, he blocked her number, he terminated her lease, he spread rumors that turned her own friends against her. And when she told him she was pregnant, he looked her in the eye and said, "That is a problem for you to solve." Derek Voss was a billionaire at the peak of his power, a god in a city of kings. And Elena Foster? She was just a signature he no longer needed. But here's what he never calculated. She kept the recordings, every whispered instruction, every quiet command to sign without asking questions. Every word he thought disappeared into the walls of their marriage. She saved all of it. And the night he walked into the most powerful restaurant in Manhattan, his mistress on his arm, his empire at its peak, she walked into. 5 months pregnant, standing beside the one man on Wall Street that even billionaires fear. The crystal glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The lesson this story carries: power built on someone else's silence is always one recording away from collapse. What you bury doesn't disappear, it waits. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or discarded by someone who thought you had no voice, this story is for you. Hit like if you're staying until the end. Subscribe so the next chapter finds you first. And drop one word in the comments, karma, if you believe people always reap what they sow.
Before Elena Foster entered the Aurelius, a queen returning from exile, she had endured a specific kind of pain, a pain I had carefully designed for her. Just 8 months ago, her life was forgettable. She was a simple analyst at some mid-tier firm. She lived in a small apartment we shared, with a foolish dream of starting a family. She had no wealth, no influence. She was invisible to the people who mattered. But she had loved me with a purity that became a liability. Back then, I was not the man I am today. I was fighting for my future. I was chasing capital, bleeding my savings, hungry for recognition. Elena was there for every setback. She worked late to cover our bills. She cooked cheap meals to conserve our funds. She believed in me when I was just a blueprint of myself. She was my foundation, a necessary part of the construction. But when my company finally exploded, after one deal with a major fund, the blueprint was complete. I finally had the resources, the fame, the power. My ego became the monument it was always meant to be. I started to dress for my station. I started to speak like a king. I moved differently. The old life felt like a cage. Then came the whispers, the necessary lies. Then came Leah Crane, the specialist I hired to sculpt my public image. I knew Elena suspected things. The late nights, the new cologne, the coldness in my voice. She wanted to believe marriage meant something permanent, but foundations are meant to be built upon and left behind. The night I tore it all down still feels like a clean amputation. She was pregnant. She thought that anchor would hold me. She waited for me that night with a pathetic flicker of hope. I arrived after 12. I brought Leah with me. Her lipstick was smudged, her hair a mess, her laugh a signal of my victory. I felt no shame. "Elena," I said, with a simple wave of my hand, "let us not be dramatic. Leah and I are a unit now." Her world stopped. "A unit, Derek. We are married." "A temporary state," I told her. My voice was calm and sharp. "You had to know this was ending. We were never equals. You are a sweet girl, but you are not designed for this life." Her hands started to shake. "I am pregnant." That was the moment of decision. My expression did not change. My resolve did not break. I leaned in and spoke the simple truth in a quiet, final tone. "Then that is a problem for you to solve. I cannot have a child diluting my brand. Not at this stage." The next morning, I had her things removed. Her access to my world was revoked. Her number was blocked. Her lease was terminated. I left her with nothing. Nothing but the complication growing inside her. For months, I assumed she was fading away in some forgotten part of the city, eating cheap food, working a meaningless job, weeping into a pillow. I never saw her. I never heard from her. I never thought of her. Her story was over, but fate had connected her to the one man who could challenge my world. I did not know Adrian Cole would rewrite her ending. Elena Foster's place in Queens was not an apartment. It was a holding cell, a place with cracked plaster and a broken heater. After I removed her, this was the best she could find. She likely told herself it was a brief setback, but I made sure it would feel permanent. The area was not unsafe, just bleak. A mix of street food and wet asphalt. The noise of the city was a constant reminder of the world she had lost. She was on the 4th floor, Unit 4C. She was alone, with her belly and the ghost of the life I had given her. I imagined she woke up sick every morning. Nausea was her new reality. She probably knelt at the sink, shaking, sometimes crying, sometimes just staring at the floor and telling herself she could survive one more day. Her little job at a finance office paid just enough to exist. The walk to the bus probably grew harder every week. She likely hid her stomach under her coat. She did not want the world to see my mistake. Her joy had become her shame. Being alone was not the worst part. The rumors were. My public relations team worked with surgical precision. One by one, her old friends and colleagues turned away. They treated her like a disease. She trapped him. She was after his money. The pregnancy was a tactic. She was trying to ruin him. None of it was true, but all of it worked. She probably kept her head down at her job. She avoided the break room. She ignored the looks people gave her. Some days, she probably hid in the bathroom for 5 minutes, just to breathe. At night, she would sit on a mattress on the floor, her only furniture. She would place her hands on her stomach. She would whisper lies to the thing I did not want. I am trying, she would say. I promise I am trying. But promises do not pay for heat. One night, I imagine she found a notice on her door. Bright yellow. A final warning about the rent. An eviction. Her world would have blurred. She had been choosing between vitamins and electricity, between food and a roof. This was the moment she finally broke. Inside, she must have collapsed on the floor, holding that paper as she finally fell apart. Her breath would catch. Panic would rise. Then her phone would buzz. An unknown number. She would almost ignore it. But some instinct would make her answer. Miss Foster, a man's calm voice would say, "My name is Adrian Cole. I understand you require assistance." She would have frozen. She had never met him, but that name, the Adrian Cole, was a legend. Before she could form a word, he would add, "I am downstairs. Please come to the door." Her heart would stop, and her life, the one I had ended, was about to begin again. For a long time, Elena would not have moved. She would just sit there, on that cold floor, with the eviction notice in her hand. The phone still pressed to her ear. Outside her window, the sounds of her failure would continue. But in her tiny room, everything had gone quiet. "Miss Foster," the man would repeat, his voice impossibly calm. "This is Adrian Cole. I need to speak with you." Her breath would have failed her. Adrian Cole was not a man. He was a force, the Phantom of Wall Street, a king who never showed his face, but who controlled the entire board. This city requires order. It demands strength. I built my world on these principles. Every decision, every sacrifice, was a stone laid in the foundation of an empire. Elena was a beautiful, flawed stone. She had to be removed. It was a clean extraction, a necessary surgery to save the whole. I saw it as a kindness, releasing her from a world she was not built for. She was meant for quiet things, not for the battlefield I command. This was not cruelty. It was logic. I gave her a choice she was too weak to make for herself. I set her free, and in doing so, I protected my legacy. I protected everything I had ever worked for. This was the right thing to do. There was no other way. The weak cannot be allowed to compromise the strong. That is the first rule of survival, and I am a survivor. I chose a life of consequence, a life of power. Leia understands this. She is a reflection of my success, sharp, polished, and beautifully uncomplicated. My penthouse overlooks the city, a testament to my control. We exist above the noise, above the struggle. I sometimes thought of Elena in her small world. The flickering lights, the unpaid bills, the simple life she was now living. It confirmed my decision. I felt no pity. I felt only the quiet satisfaction of a problem correctly solved. Her world was small because she was small. My world is large because I am not. This is the natural order of things. Some men build empires, others are crushed by them. There is no room for sentiment in that equation. I carved out my place in this world. She was simply in the way. Image. The name felt like a phantom limb, a thing once attached to me. Was this about vengeance? I almost laughed at the thought. Vengeance is for the weak. I stood in my office, watching the city lights ignite. Elena, my decision was not revenge. It was triage. You were a weakness I could not afford. I was building an empire, a structure of pure strength. There was no room for sentiment, no place for a heart that beat louder than a stock ticker. My world demanded sacrifice. I simply made one. I am not strong, she once cried. I know, I told her, without a pause. You are not. And so I cut the cord. I stared out at the perfect grid of the city, a flawless, controlled system I helped build. My world was finally in order, a simple, unassuming quiet. I had done what was necessary. I had saved my creation from her. My life had collapsed once because I trusted a fragile heart. I would not make that mistake again. I felt the rightness of it all settle in my bones. A perfect calm. The next morning, I sat on the edge of my bed. I stared at the clean lines of my penthouse, a monument to control. No clutter, no sentiment, no ghosts. Adrian Cole was just a name on a rival letterhead, nothing more. The embossed lettering was familiar, a symbol of a world I dominated. I slept soundly. My mind replayed nothing from the past. The past was a closed ledger. His arrival, his voice, the storm he represented, was not my concern. I kept telling myself it was all irrelevant. Men like him did not interfere in my discarded affairs. They did not climb into the ruins of my past decisions. They did not look at a woman I had deemed unnecessary and offer a hand. But if he had, I knew what I would do. A knock startled me. Security, I thought, my pulse steady. But it was not security. It was Lila, my beautiful, anxious. My neighbor, Mrs. Calderon, brought me breakfast, a small kindness in a world that had shown me little. She told me I was stronger than I thought. I wished I could believe her. After she left, I got ready. I pulled on a worn sweater. I looked in the mirror and saw a survivor, tired, scared, but still standing. I picked up the card one more time. Help you rebuild everything. The words were a lifeline. Derek had shattered my world in a single night. Impossible things could happen. Perhaps they could happen in my favor for once. Just before noon, I left my apartment. I took a deep breath, and I went to meet the man who offered me a chance to fight back. His building was a tower of glass and steel. It touched the sky. I felt small standing before it. Inside, the world was different. Marble floors, quiet efficiency, people who moved with an unshakable confidence. I felt like an intruder. And then I saw it, a digital screen with scrolling news. There he was, Derek Voss. His face, smiling and confident, stared out at me. Beside him lay a crane. The caption spoke of their success. A wave of nausea hit me. I felt the old panic rising, the familiar feeling of being worthless, of being erased. I wanted to run. Then I heard my name. Miss Foster. Adrian was there. His presence was a shield against the ghosts of my past. You came, he said, his voice calm. I nodded, unable to speak. I almost turned around. He smiled faintly. I am glad you did not. We entered a private elevator, and the noise of the world faded away. I know this is difficult, he said gently, but you have something I need. I shook my head. I have nothing left. He looked at me, his gaze direct. You have the truth, and the truth is the only weapon men like Derek truly fear. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark, a tiny flicker of hope. When the elevator doors opened to his office, overlooking the entire city, I knew my life was about to change. I do not get surprised. I create surprises. I orchestrate outcomes. My empire was built on the foundation of absolute control. But when I saw her, Elena, standing with Adrian Cole, a crack formed in that foundation. I told myself it meant nothing. I projected arrogance. I dismissed her as the same fragile creature I had cast aside. But the image remained. It played in my mind on a relentless loop. Her, standing tall. Him by her side. My investors saw it. My board members saw it. My staff saw it. And for the first time in a decade, I felt a cold, unfamiliar sensation. I felt fear. She looked cheap, Laya said, scrolling through her phone. I ignored her. Her vanity was a distraction. Why was she there? I snapped. She has no place in that world. Leia looked at me, a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe she does now, she said. I shot her a glare that would silence most people. But the question remained. Adrian Cole does not engage in charity. He is a predator, just like me. He must be using her. But how? She has nothing. She is nothing. Then why was he standing beside her like a bodyguard? The question echoed in the silent penthouse. It made no sense. And things that do not make sense are dangerous. My headquarters felt different the next morning. The air was thick with unspoken questions. I saw the glances from my employees, the curiosity. I slammed my office door and stared at the numbers on my screens. Financials, stocks, reports. They usually calmed me, but not today, because his name was there. Cole and Hawthorne Capital. He was buying pieces of my infrastructure, quietly, legally, a ghost in my machine. My assistant's voice on the intercom was the final spark. A reporter. I refused. Then another call. Varelli, from the board. Adrian Cole was meeting with my senior investors. It was not a future threat. It was an attack. It was happening now. Friendly. The word was a lie. This was war. Acquisition. Friendly was a weapon. Friendly meant leverage. Friendly could undo me. My pulse began to beat. Elena, a woman I had erased from the ledger, was now a liability. Adrian, a man I saw as a competitor, was now an enemy. I slammed my fist on the desk. Elena is not a part of this game. She does not have the strength for it. But even as I thought it, I saw the picture again, composed, cool, assured, nothing like the woman I had so easily broken. I felt a change, not guilt, not regret. Something far worse, a loss of control. That night, alone in my tower, I searched for Elena online. There was nothing new. No openings. No weakness. Just silence. And silence in my world is the sound of an ambush being set. I leaned back, tightening my grip on a glass of scotch. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. If Adrian wants a war, I will remind Elena what happens when you stand against me. I did not realize then, But this threat would be the first crack in the foundation of my life. Lila Crane always thought she knew about power. Not my kind of power, but the fragile, hollow version built on appearances. Looks, rumors, headlines, manufactured desire. She had entered my world with a calculated smile, a masterful manipulation, a practiced way of making herself useful. So when the image of Elena and Adrian appeared online, grainy yet clear, Lila felt something she understood completely. Obsolescence. She sat in my penthouse kitchen, staring at her phone as the pale sun lit the cold marble. Is that Adrian Cole with Elena Foster? She is better now. Why does she look more valuable than Lila? The twist of the season. Lila's perfect fingers clenched her phone. "What is this?" she asked as I walked in, fixing my tie. I glanced at the screen, my jaw tight. "Noise," I said. "Noise." Her voice climbed. "Your forgotten wife looks like she is on the cover of a magazine with Adrian Cole. Do you know what that says about your judgment?" "I do not care about Adrian," I lied. "Oh, really?" Lila's eyes were sharp. "You should, because they are building a story, Derrick. A story where you are the foolish, obsolete, discarded one." I felt the slight sting. Lila saw it, and she smiled. A powerful man's fear was her favorite currency. "And worse," she said, leaning against the counter. "They are making Elena the sympathetic one." That word felt like acid. "Elena?" I spat her name. "She is nothing in this world." Lila's smile grew colder. "Good, then she will not know how to defend herself from what is coming." I looked at her, my mind racing. "What are you planning?" "What you should have done in the beginning," her eyes gleamed. "Control the story. Ruin her before she becomes a real threat." I paused. She saw it. "Do not go soft," she warned me. "She is not your wife. She is a problem." I said nothing, but my silence was her command. That afternoon, I watched Lila work from my office, a general observing a distant battle. She dispatched rumors like assassins, anonymous tips, carefully worded leaks, whispers sent to columnist accounts, known for their cruelty. Her narrative became truth. Elena Foster, the scheming ex-wife, pregnant and vindictive. The insider story of a woman scorned. Sources confirm she is using the child to reclaim her former lifestyle. Lila was thorough. She unearthed an old photograph, one of Elena crying on a subway platform, a day I vaguely recalled she had collapsed from stress. Lila sold it to a tabloid. The caption implied mental collapse and a desperate need for money. My problem was being managed. Within hours, the internet became a beast. Elena would see all of it. She was sitting in his office, looking at numbers he gave her to decipher when her phone began its relentless assault. Alerts accumulated. Her stomach clenched. She tapped the screen. Her world collapsed. Dozens, then hundreds of hateful messages appeared. Falsehoods, accusations, a special kind of cruelty designed by strangers, yet it felt like it came from me. Her hands shook. Adrian saw it happen. "Elena?" he asked her softly. She could not find her voice. She showed him the screen. For a second, his expression was a mask. No movement, no anger, no surprise. Then his gaze became cold, a dark and controlled rage I had never witnessed in him. "This was not Derrick," Adrian stated. "This is Lila," Elena managed to whisper. "Yes?" He rose from his chair, his movements deliberate, dangerous. "And she has made a mistake she will regret." Elena trembled. "What is our next move?" Adrian looked at her, not with sympathy, but with resolve. "Now," he said, "we change the rules of the game." And with that, the real war was declared. I had never been in a boardroom I did not command. I stood before mine, Now, the windows displayed Manhattan as my kingdom. The Hudson was a silver ribbon in the morning sun, and the Empire State Building was a testament to my own ambition. The room had the scent of power, of expensive wood, and the leather of chairs that held important men. It was the scent of my authority, but my focus was not on the view. It was on the long table, and the serious men and women who turned to me when I spoke. Their faces showed what I expected: respect, focus, a healthy amount of fear. I held my company in the palm of my hand. "Gentlemen," one of them began, "about the consultant you hired." Consultant. The word was a tool, nothing more. I nodded, my expression unreadable. "Yes," I said with purpose. Her analysis was final. My pulse was steady. "I know what you are thinking," I continued. "She came from nowhere. She is not one of us. She is not a killer in a suit, but I value her ruthlessness and her results." That settled the room. I valued results. I had brought in an outsider to clean house, to find any weakness. My gaze swept the room as my team prepared. "Let us begin," I said quietly. They obeyed, the room humming with quiet efficiency. Screens came alive. Numbers filled the displays. Voices were low and confident. The meeting was underway. At first, I observed in silence, letting my authority fill the space. Then, my chief financial officer displayed a series of charts, documents I knew intimately. They showed the profitability of Vustech's infrastructure deals, the clean numbers, the perfect margins, the expenses that I personally approved. My stomach felt a familiar pride. I recognized those deals. My own brilliance was attached to every single one. I had forced her to sign things she could not possibly comprehend back when I thought she could be useful. I never had to explain. I never thought she would question a single signature. "Dershowitz," an executive asked suddenly, "are these patterns secure?" My blood felt warm with confidence. I looked at the board, calm, almost bored. "They're ironclad," I said without emotion. But then my assistant entered. Her face was pale. She held a phone out to me. "Sir," she whispered, "it is an urgent call from legal." A ripple of concern went through the room. I continued slowly at first, then with rising irritation. I took the phone, dismissing their worry, the pressure of their eyes on me. I just listened. The voice on the other end was frantic. He spoke of Adrian Cole, of a meeting. He said they were exposing everything. Cheeks burned, not with shame, but with cold fury. The executives exchanged nervous looks. One finally leaned forward. "Sir, is there a problem with the contracts you are describing?" I heard the words, but they sounded distant. "A major corporate fraud." The line went dead in my hand. Right. It was a clean cut, a necessary amputation. I told myself this was for her own good. My world was too much for her. Adrienne was a vulture, using a wounded animal for his games. Then came the whispers. He was propping her up, giving her a voice, my voice. Everything she knew, she learned from me. She was a blank page I had written on. Now someone else was turning that page against me. They called her insight central to their strategy. An amusing thought. Her insight was a reflection of my own. That should have been my advantage. Adrienne said he had underestimated her. No, he had underestimated my carelessness in leaving a walking archive of my life behind. They gave her a seat at my table, not a seat, a prop, a temporary one, but it was a symbol, a challenge, and a mistake. What could she possibly do? Derrick would soon learn his lesson. They all would. The world began to shift around my name, a tremor I refused to acknowledge. It was not a grand explosion, just quiet whispers in halls I owned, a subtle change in the air. People looked at me with new eyes. They spoke to me with a caution they never dared use before, all because Adrian Cole gave her a title, a costume. He called it visibility. I called it a leash. Cole and Hawthorne Capital released their little memo, a pathetic move, announcing Elena Foster as a consultant, her name next to men of substance. It was a joke. The announcement was meant to be a quiet threat, a poison dart. But in the towers I built, every whisper is a shout. By midday, the stories were already twisted. Is that the one? The woman he left behind? She is working with Cole now. I heard she found something, a ghost story. Every elevator ride became a performance of confidence. Every look was a challenge I had to meet. Some were curious, some were filled with a pathetic admiration for her. But they no longer saw me as untouchable. That was the real danger. The pressure was a familiar weight. She was a fragile thing, pregnant, exhausted. She did not belong in this world, and yet she was there. A lamb pretending to be a wolf. That afternoon, Adrienne took her to the Regent Club, a place for kings, not for forgotten queens. It was a calculated insult, a public display. He was parading my cast-off. I knew she would panic. I could almost hear her thin voice. Those people are powerful. They are real. I am not. You are a tool, Elena, and that is all you need to be. She would have worried about her clothes. So predictable. Adrienne's little gestures were meaningless theater. A dress, some shoes. He was dressing up a doll to play a part. He called it a seat at the table. I called it a trap. The Regent Club was my territory, my hunting ground, built on old power and secrets, a place where I made fortunes. As she walked in beside him, the silence was all about me, not her. It was a ripple of shock, not because of the woman he brought. It was because he had brought my woman, my discarded property. The man who greeted them was my ally, or he had been. His surprise was a bad sign. Adrienne's smile was a mask. This is Elena Foster. She is helping us. The man's eyes went to her stomach, then her face. A quick calculation, assessing the weapon. Miss Foster, I hear you found what our people missed. She would stammer. I am not sure that is true. It is, Adrienne would insist. Then they would turn. The questions would start. What did you see? How deep does the problem go? Why did my own company fail to see it? Her voice, usually so small, would find its strength, because she was not using her own mind. She was using mine. She explained the numbers, the statements, the flow of money. She was reciting my methods. She was telling them my secrets, and that truth captivated them. When she was done, the man was impressed. Miss Foster, this could be the largest corporate scandal in 3 years. My scandal, my name. A murmur filled the room. Adrian would lean in, whispering his poison. This is why you are here. She would feel a flicker of power. Does he know yet? No, Adrian would say, his eyes like ice. But he will, and his world will crack. For the first time, she was not the victim. She was the threat. But she was not the danger. She was the bullet. And he had just pulled the trigger. I had always believed I was beyond reach. But for the last 48 hours, the ground beneath me had begun to shift. A faint tremor, then a definite quake. My calls were met with silence. People were watching. They were whispering. Whenever I entered a room, the conversation died. A stillness that comes before a collapse. It was paranoia. It had to be. Then Grant Melville burst into my office. We have a problem. His voice was tight with fear. I did not look up from my work. Grant, the building is not on fire. It is worse. That got my attention. He threw papers on my desk. Cole and Hawthorne are buying into our partners. Quietly, I stared at him. And, he nearly yelled. And Adrian Cole only makes moves like this when he is planning an execution. The word hung in the air. Grant was not done. The board is asking things, hard things. My pulse began to beat faster. Adrian. It was always about Adrian, and about her, his pawn. What did she say? I growled. What poison did she pour in his ear? Grant looked away. I do not think they are lies. I slammed my hand on the desk. She knows nothing. Grant flinched. She signed the papers, he said. His voice was a whisper. She was my wife, I snapped. I told her to sign. She did not need to understand. Grant's voice dropped lower. Legally, that will not make a difference. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Then the final blow. Derrick. If she goes to the SEC, it is over. That night, the penthouse felt like a prison. I paced the floor. I called Leia again and again. Nothing. On the 10th try, she answered. What is it? What is happening? I demanded. Why is he after me? What did you do? Leia laughed. A cold sound. You left your wife broken and penniless. Did you think she would just vanish? She is not smart enough for this, I said. Someone is pulling her strings. Leia's voice became steel. Perhaps you should have respected her. I froze. She had never defended Elena before. A terrible shift. Are you on my side? I hissed. A pause. A long, damning silence. I am on the side that wins, she said, and the line went dead. My hand shook. My mistress, my company, and Elena, the ghost I thought I had buried, was walking again. The next morning, I went to the boardroom to reclaim my kingdom. But the moment I walked in, I knew. 12 members, 12 pairs of cold, assessing eyes. Derrick, the chairman, said, We must talk about the audit. My body went rigid. What audit? A folder slid toward me. On the cover, 2 words, Cole and Hawthorne, and underneath, preliminary findings. Vostek, anomalies. My world began to blur. Adrienne had already struck. We will need your cooperation, the chairman said, and your honesty. My chest felt tight. You believe I am hiding things? We believe. The chairman said slowly. Your ex-wife has information we must investigate. The room tilted. Elena. I whispered her name. I had broken her. I had erased her. I expected her to fade away. Instead, she had become the only voice they wanted to hear. I was losing my story, my empire, my reality. Derrick Voss had created a monster he could not control. Her name was Elena Foster. I did not see Adrienne coming that night. I did not see him at all. I only saw her face, floating in the dark. A face I once owned, now a mask of fury aimed at me. Are you okay? The question was not for her. It was for the world, and the answer was no. I sat in my office. The city lights were my kingdom. Everything was in order. Every asset was protected. Some say my methods are harsh. I say they are necessary. An empire is not built on kindness. It is built on will. Elena was a part of that design, a beautiful signature on a page. I gave her a life beyond her dreams. She owed me her loyalty. Her signature was a small price for that world. I did what was required to protect my creation, our future. That was her role. It was a simple duty. She probably called it a trick. That is a child's word. This is the real world. Those accounts were a fortress. A necessary system to protect the engine of my company. The money moved where it had to move. Her signature was just the key. It was a simple legal step. A wife's signature is part of her husband's authority. That is how the world works. I knew she did not understand. That was the point. Understanding would have made her fearful. It would have made her a problem. Her ignorance was a kindness. It was a form of protection I gave her. So, she cried. It was predictable. Emotions are a tool for the weak. Love was our arrangement. I gave her a life, of unimaginable comfort. She was meant to provide unwavering loyalty. She broke the terms of our deal. How could she believe the danger was to her? The danger was to my life's work. Protecting my company protected her. Those copies of the documents were not a threat. They were an insurance policy, a quiet understanding of her place in my world. If she damaged my reputation, she damaged everything. I was simply making sure the foundation was secure. She never had this anger on her own. He gave it to her. Cole. I can feel his influence poisoning her mind. He took what I threw away and made it a weapon against me. Now she wants to fight, but she is not my real enemy. He is. She is just a piece. He is moving on the board. He speaks about the truth. There is no such thing. There are only stories, and I have always been the better storyteller. She has nothing, only tears and a fantasy fed to her by my rival. This changes little. I will break them both. She will remember who she is. The first strike must be swift. Leia always understood that. The media leak was a perfect move, a quiet word to the right people. Now they see her as I do, a woman at the center of a scandal. Her name is ruined before she can even speak. It is not a lie. Her signature is on the papers. An investigation is a real threat. We just showed them the truth. Her pregnancy, a detail. A card she would have played for sympathy. We simply played it first. This is not about cruelty. It is about strategy. It is how you win. They think they can shatter me. They do not understand me at all. I am not the one who breaks. I am the one who does the breaking. Cole talks about his truth. He will show them papers. He will point to signatures. He thinks a folder of documents can destroy an empire I built with my own hands. Her signature is a stain on her character, not on mine. I will portray her as a vengeful ex-wife, a willing partner seeking revenge. The board will understand. They will see her weakness. They will see his ambition. They will see my power. His words are a venom. He fills her head with lies about her own strength. She was never strong. She was an object of beauty, meant to be admired and protected. She survived because I allowed her to survive. I shielded her from the cruel world she now thinks she can challenge. He kneels by her chair, a pathetic gesture. He offers her his protection. But my protection had been absolute. She threw it all away. Now she enters a war with a man who will discard her when she is no longer useful. I will teach her what real weakness is. I watch her on the monitors. She is walking into my building, my domain. The polished floor reflects a woman I no longer recognize. Her hand rests on her belly, a calculated move. Cole is right beside her, a predator in a fine suit. They believe this is their moment of victory. They are walking into the heart of my power. Every wall, every window belongs to me. The very air in this building obeys my will. They are not here to wage a war. They are here to be utterly consumed. My board is waiting. They will see her for the traitor she is. She stands there with false courage, an actress in a role she cannot possibly maintain. The board members are watching her. They can smell blood in the water, but they do not know whose it is. I am perfectly calm. This is my arena. Leia will be my voice. She will tear down this little performance. She will expose all of the lies. We have them trapped. This room is a cage. And I hold the only key. I remember the scent of her fear. It is hidden now, but it is still there. I will pull it out for everyone to see. This was a formality, a simple cleanup. Then I saw her, Elena. My stomach clenched. She did not belong here. This was my world, not hers. I held her gaze, a silent command to stop. She met it. Her words were a quiet defiance that annoyed me. My jaw set. Before I could put her back in her place, Chimshuram, the chairman spoke. We were being summoned. Elena walked ahead. I watched her, a ghost of the woman I once controlled. She claimed her seat at the table. My table. 12 pairs of eyes judged me through her. The air was thick with their silent questions. I sat opposite her, trying to break her with my stare. The chairman started, his voice a dull drone about signatures and money. It was all procedural nonsense. I leaned in, using the old voice, the one that always worked. Sweetheart, I said, just let me handle this. The word was a key. It was meant to unlock her obedience. It was supposed to remind her of her place. Instead, her jaw tightened. She spoke to them, not to me. Her voice was steady. She claimed ignorance. She said, I told her it was all too complex for her mind. Whispers echoed across the polished wood. The chairman held up a file. He spoke of transfers. He spoke of private accounts. He asked if she knew. No, she said. Her voice was louder now. A performer playing a role. She accused me of misleading her. A surge of hot rage went through me. I slammed my hand on the table. A lie. It was all a lie. Her lawyer's voice was a stiletto heel. She has proof. Elena reached into her bag. She pulled out a small device. A memory stick. Her hands were perfectly still. She spoke of recordings, my words, my private reassurances to her. My face went cold. She had recorded our life, our home. She recorded me. The whispered words were for her alone, a final appeal. She had to, she said. The reason was a dagger, to protect herself from me. The chairman played the files. My own voice betrayed me. It filled the space between us. Sign it, Elena. Do not ask questions. It is just a formality. The words I used to soothe her now condemn me. The room was utterly silent when it stopped. The chairman looked at me. He expected an explanation. My mouth was dry. My thoughts were empty. And I saw her then. Not the timid wife I had molded, but a stranger. A creature made of ice and steel. She was terrified of me once. Now, she held all the power. I am done, she said. Her quiet words were a declaration of war. That man, Adrian, watched her with pride. The room was no longer mine. It was a stage for her victory. The world held its breath, waiting for my fall. The moment the recording died, the world cracked. Power shifted under the table. I, Derek Voss, who commanded this very room, felt small. The chairman closed the file. It was a judge's gavel falling. Thank you, he said to her. He was thanking my destroyer. I stood up too fast. Proceed with what? The words tore from my throat. You are taking her side. My ex-wife. She is unstable. A liar. Stop. The chairman's command cut through my rage. Your explanations come later. It was a dismissal, an execution. I turned to Elena. Fury was all I had left. You have started something you cannot finish. She met my eyes. She was not afraid. Yes, she said. I do. Before I could answer, the door swung open. 2 men in dark suits entered. Government officials. A cold shock ran through the room. Even Adrian looked surprised. His mask was almost perfect. Mr. Voss, one of them said. His tone was flat, impersonal. Questions about financial irregularities. Vostek. My company. My name. I stammered. It is a misunderstanding. I have done nothing wrong. The other man gave me a notice. This is not an arrest. You must cooperate. The humiliation was a physical blow. The board members looked away. Their eyes were cold, calculating. I was no longer an asset. I was a liability. The chairman folded his hands. He spoke without emotion. Mr. Voss, you are suspended, temporarily. Silence. Then the rage broke free. Suspended? I roared. You believe her over me? She is nothing. She is. Adrian stood. The entire room went still. Choose your next words very carefully. His voice was quiet. It was more dangerous than my shouting. My mouth clicked shut. Even in my fury, I understood. Adrian Cole was not a man who made threats. He was a man who delivered consequences. The officials gestured for me to come with them. I could not move. I looked at Elena one last time. The betrayal was a poison in my veins. You are not alone in this, I said. He put you up to it. Her voice was infuriatingly calm. No, you did this to yourself. My face contorted. And in that moment, they all saw. Not the titan of industry, not the leader, just a man cornered by a truth he refused to accept. As the agents led me from the room, a heavy silence fell. I heard her exhale. A sound of relief. Her hands were shaking. I saw that man's hand on her arm, grounding her. You did well, he told her. She did not feel that way. I could see it. Her victory was costing her everything. The edges of her composure were fraying. The fear and humiliation I had placed on her for years were now my own. The chairman's voice cut through my thoughts. Miss Foster, you are a witness, not a suspect. He was assuring her of her safety. He was thanking the man who helped her ruin me. You will have our full cooperation, Adrian promised him. As they walked out, camera flashes exploded. The wolves were here. The story was already loose. Elena hid her face. Adrian shielded her. Stay close to me. He was her protector now. The world was not looking at her with pity anymore. They saw strength. They saw a threat. Elena Foster was no longer a ghost. She was the woman who had brought down an empire. And I had to call Leia. She was supposed to control the story. The story was her entire purpose. Leia was the master of narratives, the queen of spin. She turned messy truths into beautiful lies. She lived in the spotlight she created. Now that light was a fire, and it was burning her. It was burning us both. The news of my suspension was everywhere. The journalists did not stop with me. They dug deeper. They went for the woman who built my image, the one who whispered strategies in my ear. They went for Leia. Her phone was a constant buzz of failure. Reporters, panicked clients, ghosts from her past. She ignored them. I found her in my penthouse. She was pacing, a trapped animal in a gilded cage. The city lights mocked her. This is bad, she said to the empty room. This is very bad. It was an understatement. She had the television on. Elena's face was on every channel. Not a scorned woman, not a victim, a credible witness. The key to the investigation. The headlines were knives. Former wife, Sve, exposes fraud. Evidence of systemic misconduct. Leia's face was pale. Bile and fury mixed in her eyes. This was not the narrative we built. Elena was supposed to break. Elena was supposed to be a footnote. Elena was not supposed to win. Leia hurled her glass at the wall. How was she winning? She screamed at me. She was nothing. But I knew. We both knew. Elena had something we had traded away long ago. The truth. And the truth was a better weapon than all our lies. When I finally walked in, my lawyer beside me, she ran to me. Why did you not tell me about the SEC? She hissed. About the recordings? I pushed past her. Not now, Leia. Yes, now, she snapped. This is all falling apart. The media is blaming me. They think I was your accomplice. Fix this. I turned on her. My voice was raw. Fix what? You started this. You attacked her online. You made it personal. You pushed her into his arms. Do not be absurd, Leia scoffed. She was weak. I thought she would crumble. Well, she did not. Silence filled the room. My voice dropped. And now she has Adrian Cole. You have no idea what you have done. Leia glared, pretending at bravery. You think I am scared of him? You should be. For the first time she saw it, the real fear in my eyes, and it terrified her more than any threat. The next morning, she went to her firm, a fake smile plastered on her face. She expected whispers. She expected judgment. She did not expect the end. Her assistant was waiting. "Layla," she said. Her voice was full of pity. "The partners need to see you." The words sliced through the silence. Terminated. Impossible. This was not part of the plan. The partners are turning away from her. They are looking at me. They see a risk, a problem. Her spectacular failure is becoming my failure. She stumbles backward. "I built this place." Her words are hollow, useless. Security takes her away. A part of my fortress has been ripped out and discarded. She is gone, and I am left standing here in the ruins. She is watching her world collapse, but I am watching mine begin to crumble. She was not the one losing. She was just the first. The city was mine. I built it, one deal, one signature, one necessary lie at a time. From my office, the river looked like a silver vein, pumping life into the organism I controlled. I was a creator of order. I provided stability. What I did for Elena was part of that. I shielded her from the ugliness, the brutal mechanics of power. Her signature was a formality, a quiet contribution to the life I gave her. She lived in a beautiful world because I fought in a dirty one. This was not cruelty. This was protection. This was love. Adrian Cole never understood that. He saw rules. I saw results. He called it betrayal. I called it Tuesday. He was a small man, haunted by a single loss. He did not see the bigger picture. I saw it all. I gave thousands of people jobs. I built things that would outlast me. My hands were not clean, but they were strong. They had to be. Elena never needed to know the details. Her world was soft, uncomplicated. That was my gift to her. Adrienne's pathetic quest for revenge was a footnote in my story. A ghost from 5 years ago. He was a man who lost and could not move on. It was sad, really. That is what I thought that night, watching my city gleam. I felt a sense of peace. Everything was in its proper place. Everyone was playing their part. The board was happy, the market was strong, and Elena was safe, somewhere away from all of this. She was my one, beautiful, perfect, and irrelevant secret. She was the key to my peace, a life separate from the battlefield of my work. Adrienne thought he could use her, a foolish notion. She was mine. Her loyalty was a given, a constant. That is what I believed. She understood the life I provided, even if she did not understand the methods. That was the arrangement, an unspoken truth. He saw a weapon. I saw a wife, or an ex-wife. The distinction mattered legally, but not in my heart. She was a part of my empire's foundation, and foundations do not just walk away. They do not speak. They simply hold everything up, silent and strong. It never occurred to me that she could be anything else, that I could be wrong. The order I had built was absolute. It was unbreakable. The walls were thick. The lawyers were loyal. The truth was whatever I paid for it to be. I was not just a player in the game. I was the game. Then, the first tremor. A strange news alert. A market fluctuation. Nothing. Just noise. I dismissed it. My world did not shake. It was solid. It was real. I had made it so. The cost was high, but the rewards were everything. I was trying to make things right in a world that was always wrong. That was my truth, and no one could take that from me. I was certain of it. My empire was eternal. Empires fall from within. I had forgotten that simple truth. The next morning, Vostek felt alien. It was a tomb. The security guards did not meet my eyes. My assistants scattered like insects. Whispers died when I walked past. I was a ghost in the halls of my own creation. I stormed toward the executive floor, a king returning to a silent castle. But I found only anarchy. Board members were shouting. Lawyers paced the floors. Phones shrieked like alarms. And every screen showed the same headline. SEC investigates Vostech. Corporate fraud alleged. My stomach turned to ice. I forced my way into the boardroom. Grant Melville, my CFO, was speaking to the directors. His face was a mask of defeat. Grant saw me. His expression was pure shock. Derek, you cannot be here. My authority was absolute. Do not lecture me, Grant, I snapped. What is this? A board member, cold and precise, stepped forward. The SEC has requested complete access to our books. They claim probable cause. Probable cause? The words felt foreign. My voice was shaking. Based on what? The chairman looked at me without pity. Based on financial irregularities tied to your wife's signature. My ex-wife, I snarled. Precisely, he said, which is why her testimony was so convincing. The room went dead silent. Testimony. The word echoed. She spoke. She betrayed me. She destroyed me. Elena, I whispered. My voice was a ghost. Grant sighed. They think you coerced her, manipulated her. She was not coerced. I roared. She knew, but the lie was thin and brittle. Everyone in that room heard it break. At that moment, our lawyer approached. She held a stack of papers like a death sentence. Mr. Voss, the board has voted. You are on immediate administrative leave. Investigation pending. My mind froze. You have no authority. We do, she said. Clause 14B of your contract. Misconduct threatening corporate stability. The chairman spoke. Effective now. You have no power here, no access, no contact with anyone. The world began to spin. You cannot do this, I screamed. It is already done. I grabbed the papers, my hands trembling. Suspension, asset freeze, access revocation, my entire world gone. A stack of paper. A witch hunt, I hissed. Elena did this. She is playing all of you. No, Grant said softly. She did not. Your ex-wife came here and told the truth. A thing you have not done for years. The words were physical blows. I shook my head, denying them. Adrian Cole is behind this. He wants to destroy me. He wants my company. The chairman replied, Perhaps. But you gave him the bullets for the gun. My chest was tight. I grabbed a chair to keep from falling. I needed an ally. Anyone. Where is Leia? I demanded. The directors just looked at each other. Grant spoke. She is not coming in. What do you mean? It means her firm let her go. She has vanished. She refused to speak to your legal team this morning. I staggered back. No one was left. No allies, no power, just the ruins of my life and the woman I had turned to ash, now risen as a phoenix. Security came to walk me out. I did not fight. My legs were stone. My vision was a blur. The elevator, my golden chariot, became a coffin taking me down, down, down. As the doors sealed my fate, one thought cut through the noise. Elena was not my downfall. Failing to control her was. I stood on the street, a king without a kingdom. The city I owned now felt like a foreign country. People hurried past, ignoring the man whose name was on the building behind him. Her face was everywhere, on news screens and shop windows. Elena Voss, the wronged wife, the brave survivor. My narrative had been stolen and twisted. They made her a saint and me a monster. It was a masterpiece of public relations. Leia would have been proud, or perhaps she had a hand in it. Everyone was a snake. I wandered for hours, a ghost haunting my own story. The cold seeped into my bones. The city lights, once a sign of my power, now seemed to mock me. They illuminated my failure for the entire world to see. I was no longer a creator. I was a headline, a scandal. I ended up in a dark bar, the kind of place I would have demolished for a new tower. The television was on. They were talking about me, about my greed, my cruelty. The words meant nothing. They were flies buzzing around a lion. They did not understand the nature of the hunt, the sacrifices, the necessary blood. I listened to their small, moral judgments and felt nothing but contempt. They did not see a fallen king. They saw a criminal. They were wrong. I took a drink. The cheap liquor burned. They could take my company, they could take my money, but they could not take the truth. I built an empire, and empires are not destroyed. They are merely conquered. This was not an end. It was a beginning. I would build again. I would be smarter this time. I would be more ruthless. This was a necessary sacrifice, a clean break to preserve the whole structure we had built. For 12 hours, I believed that. I went from the most powerful woman in Manhattan to a ghost. My phone was a tombstone. I slammed it down. How did she unravel everything I made? But that was a comforting lie. It was not Elena. It was my own perfect design. Desperation finally came for me. I marched to his tower, my anger a cold, hard stone in my gut. I knocked on his door until my hand ached. "Derek, open this door." Only silence answered. I hit it again. "I lost my entire world for you." Still nothing. I pressed my head to the wood, my voice breaking. We were supposed to be a team. The lock clicked. The face was not his. It was his lawyer. "Miss Crane," he said, his voice flat. "Mr. Voss is not available." "Available?" I hissed. "I am not a visitor. I was his partner." The lawyer corrected me. "You are someone with whom he is no longer associated." His words were clinical. And given the investigation, he must sever all communication. This was a press release, a termination notice. So, he is cutting me off. Yes, and he wants me to disappear. Yes. My chest grew tight. He cannot do this. He already did, the lawyer stated calmly. And if I were you, Miss Crane, I would hire an attorney. The door closed. I stood there shaking, humiliated, discarded, just like Elena once was. Except Elena found a patron. I was sinking. As I entered the elevator, I saw the truth. I had backed the wrong man. And unlike Elena, I had no one. Because when a king falls, he sacrifices his most loyal soldier first. I saw her everywhere, on every news screen, in every hushed conversation. I imagined her waking up without the weight of failure on her chest. The morning light would find her in some penthouse guest room. Adrian's, of course. It would touch her skin. A gentle reward she did not earn. She would sit up slowly. Her hand would rest on her belly. A perfect picture of innocence. "You are safe," she would whisper to her unborn child. "We are not alone." Her phone would buzz. A text from Adrian, board ruling released. "Come to the office. Big day." Her heart would leap with triumph, not fear. A new chapter. She would dress in a simple navy dress. Not for glamour, but for performance. The survivor. The woman who walked through fire and came out pure. When she arrived, people would not stare. They would nod. With manufactured respect. A manufactured hero. An analyst would whisper, "That is her." A senior executive would greet her by name. It would feel surreal. Powerful. Not anymore, she would think. Savoring her victory, Adrian would be waiting. Manhattan would glitter behind him. "You made it," he would say softly. "You asked me to come?" She would reply. A small, humble smile. He would hand her a folder. Elena would open it. The results of the board's vote. Effective immediately, Vostek would be overseen by his firm. Her eyes would widen. You are taking over? Temporarily, he would correct her. A lie. Power is never temporary. And Derek? Adrian's face would harden. He is finished. Legally. Publicly. Financially, there is no path back. Elena would let out a long breath. A mix of relief and false sorrow. She never wanted his destruction. She only wanted his entire world. But freedom sometimes has a price for others. Does this mean it is over? She would ask. Adrian would shake his head. No, Elena. It means it is just beginning for you. He would hand her a second document. Her name was at the top. Consultant. Strategic analyst. The salary was an insult. More in 1 year than I built in a lifetime. Elena's breath would catch. I cannot accept this. You earned it, Adrian would say. You helped uncover the truth. You risked your life. No, she risked nothing. She was a pawn who helped him win. Tears would blur her vision. You believed in me, she would whisper. No, he saw a weapon, and he used it perfectly. You faced Derek on your own terms. He was not done praising her. Elena, there is something else. Cole and Hawthorne has a penthouse. It has been empty for 2 years, furnished, safe, spacious, for a mother and her baby. Her jaw would drop. Adrian, it is yours, if you want it. She would shake her head, overwhelmed. I cannot let you. You are not letting me do anything. You are accepting what you deserve. Her eyes would fill with tears, not of fear, but of triumph, a future, a home, security. Things he never gave her. Things I helped build. Adrian would step closer. His voice would be low. You are not just rising, Elena. You are building something new. She would look at him. The man who walked into her life with a plan. The man who helped her stand. The man who cared for her. Not for who she was, but for what she could do for him. I built an empire with my own hands. That required order. It demanded control. She was part of that order. A beautiful, vital piece, but she was becoming a liability, a weakness. Giving her everything she has now was always the plan, but on my terms, when she was ready. This new life she has, this quiet sanctuary, it feels like a theft. A world I designed for her, stolen by another man. The investigation was supposed to be a small fire, something I could contain, a simple matter of reallocating blame, but she gave them the fuel. After all I did to protect her from this world, she chose to burn it down. It was all gone. My name, once a symbol of power, now a warning. My assets, frozen, my future, erased. And she was the one who lit the match. I saw her outside the building that bore my family's name, a monument to my failure. I looked nothing like the man she once knew. Power was gone, replaced by a raw, sleepless fear. I had to speak to her. I said her name. The man beside her, her new protector, squared his shoulders, but she waved him off. She owned this moment. She approached me. Her calm was a blade. What did I want? I wanted her to see the ruin. I needed her to understand. You destroyed me, I told her. The words were ash in my mouth. She asked if I ever cared. Of course I cared. The apartment, the signature, those were necessities. They were temporary measures to protect the grand design, our design, to protect her. She did not understand sacrifice. She called my actions choices, as if building a legacy is like picking from a menu. She listed my supposed sins: greed, cruelty, humiliation. Those are the words people use for ambition they cannot comprehend. I told her I lost it all. Her final words twisted the knife. She said I lost it because I tried to take everything from her, and then I broke. The apology came out, a hollow sound. It was a useless gesture. She saw right through it. She claimed I apologized to a version of myself, a ghost, A tear fell. It felt like acid on my skin. She stepped away from me, her hand on her belly, a shield. "This chapter is closed," she declared. "You are not in my future." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her there was no future without me. I created her. I had lost. Not because I was wrong, but because I had been careless. I had let a weakness fester. That was my true failure. I heard about the wedding. Of course I did. A quiet ceremony for a life built on my ashes. I imagined the city lights. I saw them as dying embers. He told her she rose on her own. A pretty lie to make him feel like a savior. A gentle man for a damaged woman. He offered to build a life with her, as if he could build anything that would last. She said she was ready. Ready for his quiet, small, safe world. As my own world shattered, she dreamt of a joy I now knew was an illusion, a fragile thing, easily broken. A child holding her hand. My child, a life I had planned. All of it was now his, a perfect picture of my defeat. There is no poetry in this, no lesson about the obstacle being the way. The obstacle was her, and I failed to remove it. I did not rise from this. I was pulled down into the rubble. Darkness does not end. It just changes its shape. She thinks she found the light. But my shadow is long. It will always touch the edges of her perfect life. People believe you are defined by what you become after the fall. I have learned the truth. You are defined by what you lost, and what you are willing to do to reclaim it. My friends, if they still exist, would not find courage in my story. Only a warning. This channel is now silent for me. My story is not for you. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.